family, our work, and our view of ourselves. Father Nicholas is the priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in Jacksonville, and Dr. Roxanne is a licensed clinical psychologist who uses her extensive training in private practice. Questions are welcome by calling 855-237-2346. That's 855-237-2346. Here now is Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Live with the Louhs. Christ is risen. Truly, He is risen. It's such a blessing to have you all with us this evening. We have such a great show planned for all of you. But before we do so, I want to just take a moment, if you're new to Live with the Louhs, and just tell you a little bit about our show. It's a show that merges both faith and psychology that we hope and pray will give you some practical principles that you can live by in your own walk of faith. We call it really practical Christianity. And our hope and prayer is that not only do we give you a message on a Tuesday evening or on one of our sermons that you just hear on that evening, but you're able to apply it on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, every day of your life. So thanks again for taking the time to join us this evening. We also want to invite you to stay connected to us on our social media platforms. You know, friends, we are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, all under the headings of the Louhs, and that's spelled Louhs. It's a unique spelling, but it's called the Louhs. And you can find out all about us even on our website at thelouhs.com. And if you're interested in listening to our sermons that we give every Sunday, most of our sermons, I'll be quite honest with you, we merge a lot of what we talk about as a psychologist and as a priest together to give those sermons to all of you on Sunday mornings at liturgy. If you want to subscribe to receiving those sermons, you can just simply go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. And again, that's at the Louhs. So go to youtube.com/the Louhs, and you can subscribe to our channel as well. And as always, friends, we encourage you to be part of the conversation with us all throughout the week. You know, we send out these daily inspirational messages. We've been doing this, I think, Roxanne, now for probably 2-3 years now. And many people, both inside and outside the Orthodox Church, receive these. And if you're interested in receiving them, there's no strings attached. Simply go to thelouhs.com. That's our website, /subscribe. And all you have to do is put in your email address, and all you will receive every single day at 7 a.m. Eastern Time is that day's daily inspirational message. And again, it's just a way that we can try to help make a difference in the world and really utilize the gifts that God has given all of us to make a difference in your lives. So definitely take advantage of that. And always be part of the conversation in our shows. We'd love to hear from you, especially tonight. This is a great topic that we're going to be talking about. And so we'd love to hear from you. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. Our outstanding producer, Elijah, will be taking all the calls this evening. So for free, if you'd like to be anonymous in this call, you're more than welcome to do so. They'll honor that wish as well. But again, you can do it at 1-855-237-2346. And you can also leave a comment on Ancient Faith's YouTube page as they're broadcasting the show there as well. We'd love to hear from you. So let's get started. You know, I can't believe it, but, you know, Roxanne, we are at 22 years of us being married. And,
oh, my gosh. 22
yes,
years
22 years. I know. And it's amazing, as you know, how time goes by so fast. I can remember the planning, because our anniversary is in July, that this time of the year we were planning. It was coming to the cusp of us trying to make sure that everything was done, and was everything done with the priest and the church, and were we prepared emotionally and spiritually for that moment, not to mention all the other things that needed to be done. And I can remember how chaotic it is. And for so many of us, you know, marriage is such a beautiful time, but this time of the year when you're planning could be an extraordinarily stressful time. And for that reason, we've invited two new friends of ours who have really come up with a brand new book that we want to tell you all about. It's a book that's called Crowned, and it's called Crowned, an Orthodox Christian Wedding Guide, and it's being published right here on Ancient Faith Publishing. And let me tell you a little bit about these amazing women. It's Presbytera Krista Fatorchuk, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and Presbytera Delaney Clodfelter. And these two amazing presbyteras, these are we call these, I know for some of you that are tuning in, you may not be necessarily Orthodox or familiar with those words, but these are the wives of priests, and these are two seminarian wives at St. Tikhon's Orthodox Theological Seminary, which is one of the Orthodox seminaries that we have here in the States. And they've come to create a unique resource guide for engaged couples getting ready to marry in the Orthodox Christian Church. And together they've shared, I think what's really amazing, they've shared their expertise and passion to create what they believe is missing in the Orthodox world of wedding literature, and that is a book that actually guides a couple in wedding planning. And so it's a beautiful narration of how we keep Christ at the center of the wedding planning process, which can oftentimes, as many of you know who have gone through the wedding process, can be easily derailed into other things like the band or the DJ, the food, the invitation, who's on the invitation list, you name it, you're all probably already thinking about it. But it's a beautiful narration about all the planning processes and how to streamline those things in that process. So we're so excited to both have Presbytera Krista and Presbytera Delaney on our show. So welcome to Live with the Louhs.
Thank you so much. I should note, I'm not quite a presbytera yet. I have another year of seminary, so God willing, soon, but not quite yet.
All right. Well, we look forward to that.
You'll be excited for the journey.
Absolutely. And we need some amazing people, priests and presbyteras alike in the church. And so we look forward to that. Let me just kind of begin, I guess, with you, Krista. I mean, I love the fact that you're writing this book and you put this book together, because I know as a priest, it's something that I definitely am going to take advantage of, because there's so many couples that are just needing, it's oftentimes we kind of put these kind of, we encourage our parishioners that are engaged to come in to meet with the priest a couple of times to kind of go through the process of premarital planning. But there's so much stress on their mind. And a lot of what they're going through, it's the easy part is actually the engagement. It's after that, it's like the planning process can become extraordinarily stressful. And I would be honest with you, I think sometimes it can create a lot of strain in a relationship early on. Tell us, why did you and Delaney both feel so passionate about putting together this book?
Sure. So I'll start with kind of where the idea came from originally. So I have planned one wedding in my life, and that was my own, mine and my husband. And I loved my wedding day so much. I enjoyed the planning of my wedding as well. I know not everybody can say that. Of course, there were feelings of overwhelm and stress and confusion, all these things that you hinted at, Father. But overall, my husband and I had a very positive experience, mostly thanks to the many hands and hearts that came together in our lives to help bring that day together. And one of my favorite things about our wedding was seeing so many people from many different facets of our life under one roof, and specifically under the roof of my and my husband's church. That's the church where we met, and where we got engaged, and then where we got married. So that was really special to us, and to share our church and our faith with so many loved ones was really special. So I started to jot down my experience of planning a wedding, my reflections, how I aim to keep the Orthodox faith as a connecting thread throughout the whole day, so it didn't feel like ceremony and then party, but really one cohesive experience to invite people into this treasure trove of the Orthodox faith that we have and we wanted to share. So I was kind of writing down those thoughts and reflections and ideas. And then it sort of sat and gathered virtual dust on my computer for several years until I met Delaney at, as you mentioned, St. Tikhon's Seminary as a fellow seminarian wife. And I can hand it off to Delaney to talk a little bit about her experience in the wedding planning industry. And I thought, aha, the idea comes back to life.
Excellent. Delaney, yes, please.
Yeah, no. It was super exciting because I hosted a little gathering and Presbytera Krista came, and it somehow came out that I used to plan weddings, and so she had filed that away and then reached out to me later on, and I was really excited. I was nervous. I was apprehensive because I was like, I don't know if exactly what I did is matching with your vision of how you want this to go. But I'm from Alaska. I've been helping with events since I was a teenager at our local parish there. I grew up at St. John Antiochian Cathedral in Eagle River, Alaska. And so I have been around events my whole life. I have a big family of, planners, of party planners and event planners and things like that. And so it's very second nature to me. And so when I was in college, the first time around, I decided to start a small wedding decorating business. And then I eventually expanded that to full service wedding planning. And kind of my sort of niche was planning a wedding on a budget. And part of that comes from wanting to sort of strip down and focus on what really matters. And so I was drawn to Krista's idea and approach because I felt like it really aligned with sort of my own principles of planning a wedding. And and so then that was sort of where things got started, and it was really exciting. And I was excited to be along for the ride. And I think we created a beautiful collaboration of both our strengths, which hopefully will be a useful tool for everybody.
I'm so curious, Delaney, if you felt like being a wedding planner was stressful. It was listed by CNBC as the 5th most stressful career, which is planning weddings.
Yeah, I kind of thrive on that type of chaos. I love organizing. And so for me, it's a lot of fun. And I love helping families. And I love sort of being that line of defense that keeps all the craziness away from people. So the goal is always to have no one had any idea that there were any problems.
Oh, I love people like Delaney. Oh, I love that.
So I kind of like it. So yes, it's very exhausting, especially the moments leading directly up to a wedding and the actual execution of the wedding itself.
Right.
It is a very long day. I even just helped with a very, very small scale event here at St. Tikhon's just a couple of days ago. And that was in one day I put in a 10-hour day. And that was like literally just catering for a very small number of people. So it's crazy, but I kind of love it.
So I'm hearing a really beautiful theme emerge of sort of the fluidity of our faith, as you were mentioning, Krista, sort of all the way through. And I've never heard anyone really articulate it quite like that it goes beyond the service and sort of into the reception. And I'm hearing you, Delaney, talk about the theme of sort of getting down to what matters most. And so I would love to hear how you guys respond to people, through the book, what the core message is when people are talking about the stress of cutting down the guest list, arguing over who's coming, and arguing over the venue and, the band and all the things that feel really, really important. And of course they are, important, but I'd love to hear what the book, speaks into in terms of sort of getting down to what matters most. And Krista, why don't you start us off on that?
Sure. So I definitely experienced that at times planning my own wedding, where just falling victim to the wedding industry, where everything is the most important and everything requires your attention and your money and your time. And that's not true.
Right.
One of the best pieces of advice that I received in planning my wedding, it was actually my sister who gave me this advice. She said, pick 3 things. Just pick 3 things you and your husband or your future spouse at that time that is most important to you. It's your top 3. And as you're going through and making decisions, return to those top 3. And if it's not related to or part of those 3 most important things to you, don't let it be an energy or time suck, right? Don't spend too much money. Don't worry too much about the decision. Don't let it take over, essentially, which can happen very easily. And so having those beacons and those opportunities to constantly reorient throughout the planning process was really helpful, and I think helped to get rid of and sequester a lot of the stress that wanted to bubble up. And as part of this book, we help the couple to form and come up with their big 3. That's what we call it, the big 3. And in that way, it really helps couples to, every couple is unique. Every wedding day is unique. So we're not here to tell you how your wedding should look and what it should look like, but we're guiding the couple to really find out, okay, what's important to us. And then once you have that established, okay, now we can talk about the details. And you can pick and choose what details matter and what details, you want to skip over. And that's really how this this book is organized overall. We have part 1, big picture, your big 3, your overall vision, and then the second part, part 2, now that you have your guiding principles, what details do you want to hone in on, and what do you want to skip over? What's useful to you, and whatever is not useful to you, you can leave.
I just want to remind our listeners, we are speaking with Presbytera Krista and Presbytera Delaney about their brand new book called Crowned, an Orthodox Christian Wedding Guide. This is an outstanding book that we would recommend to all of you, especially those of you that are engaged and looking forward to getting married. This kind of takes you step by step through the entire process. Will probably relieve a lot of stress that you will have in your life in planning a wedding. So they've done this great book. It's actually published right here at Ancient Faith Publishing. If you have a question for Krista or for Delaney, feel free to call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. Or feel free to leave a comment on Ancient Faith's YouTube page or even our Facebook page at the Father Nicholas's Facebook page. You can more than welcome to leave a comment there. We'd love to hear from you as well. You know, I guess this question is probably just a man question, and I probably can't think of a better way of kind of asking it. But I think for so many, even as a priest, I see this. I think for a lot of guys, it's not all of them, but I would say that a vast majority of them are just like, okay, let's just get to the wedding. Like, they're not as detailed, and I don't want to speak on behalf of all men, but I know that a lot of men really are not as concerned about these things. How do you navigate, or better yet,
picking the big 3?
Yeah, I mean, how do you navigate picking those big 3 when sometimes the guy's just like, honey, just do whatever you want.
Well, or like, are they on the same page about that, right? Because I feel like in wedding planning, at least when I'm watching couples sort of navigate, through this process, and I think it becomes super stressful, there's a ton of opinions involved, coming from outside parents and siblings and all the outside people, to where everyone's trying to accommodate their families, and they do lose sight of what are the 3 things that matter, like to us or to me, and sometimes even between husband and wife, what if that's different? How do you guys see the big 3, the choosing of the big 3 going for people?
Krista or Delaney? Delaney, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and address that a little bit. So we directly address, that was something that was very important to me. Krista and I were talking about this when we were first working on the book, was especially mothers. It tends to be the mothers. They get very involved. They have very big opinions. And so sometimes it's the mothers playing the puppet master behind the 2 getting married. Mm-hmm. And so we hope that, at the onset of this book, like Krista said, we have this sort of guiding principle, this philosophy of, establishing your big 3. And then throughout the book, there's constant reminders of, is this going back to your big 3? And so the hope is that the couple will sit down together and, they invite you, we specifically invite you to come together with your spouse. So come together with your spouse. And we give examples on things that you might want to consider that would be included in those big 3 ideas, those goals that you want to stay focused to throughout the wedding planning process. So we walk you through kind of choosing that with some suggestions and some ideas. And then immediately after that particular section, we start to talk about, how you're going to invite others into this process. Mm-hmm. And right from the very beginning, we do talk about the family. And so I think sometimes with, especially men, because I do think that tends to be more common, they're just kind of like, whatever, I know my husband. Basically, the joke was just show up and be on time. And so I think, by having this sort of this opportunity to come together, and then, hey, you got to, think about how your family's going to be involved. Right. You can sort of at the very onset maybe mitigate some of that tension by deciding how you as a couple want to bring them in. And for a guy, if he's like, I don't care if my mom wants to have an opinion, he needs to communicate that with his, future wife. And then if everybody's on board, you can go the route of, okay, well, my future wife is going to communicate primarily with my mother because I don't really care and I don't really know. Mm-hmm. So the hope is that you'll come together because we specifically ask you to come together as the couple. the hope is that you'll do that, and then through the prompts following that, it'll just make things a lot smoother, and it'll kind of mitigate some of that potential tension.
Yeah, I think, two of the biggest, stressful areas that I find as couples walk through, and you can tell me if this has been both of your experiences, is the budget and the guest list. Trying to navigate who do we not include, because again, you have a lot of opinions of family members, and then the budget, because as you said, you sit down with a planner, and before you know it, you want everything, and you didn't even know you could have the ice, whatever sculpture and all the fancy coffee drinks poured through an ice cube, so I think at some point you start to want it all. And so budget becomes, a big stressor. And so, Krista, you can start us off on this one. What are your thoughts on the two big stressful areas for couples as they navigate this process?
You hit the nail on the head. As I mentioned before, we have part one, which is all about crafting the vision and getting the overall picture of the day before getting into nitty-gritty details. And we include budget and guest count in that first part. These are some of the most central decisions to make because they affect so many other things, right? So we even give some examples of what that big three might look like. If guest count and wanting to invite everyone that and wanting to have a big fat Greek wedding is important to you, okay, we need to know that and decide that, because that affects basically every other decision coming forward. Or you mentioned, or if you want to keep it an intimate wedding, right? That's going to change moving forward what decisions are made. And then as well as budget, communication is really key there. So this book and these prompts really invite the couple to communicate at the outset who's paying for this, where's the money coming from, and really getting clear on who's contributing and what's involved, so that way, again, hopefully mitigate some of those sources of stress throughout the process, which yeah.
I'd love to sort of have you both weigh in on your nuggets of wisdom for how, if we're keeping Christ sort of central in this process of planning a party, which is really what it is. It's this big celebration, this big party. What does it look like for Christ to be central in choosing our guest list, or for Christ to be the center of choosing our vendors? Maybe you could both share some nuggets of wisdom in different domains, as maybe some of the top three that you see people, kind of identifying frequently and often, and sort of what it looks like for Christ to be the center.
At the reception, we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So Delaney, why don't you start us off?
Okay, so I think, it'll be hard for me to be completely unbiased, but one of the things for us personally, for when my husband and I got married, was we were big on, we want everybody in our parish to be able to come. And so we wanted everybody to be able to come, in addition to the added, invitations on top of that. And so for us personally, that was one way to sort of open up the reception and have it be more Christ-minded, because it's not about us. It's about this community of people that have supported us. And so that was a big one for us. Additionally, I think, like as Krista mentioned, and a big part of what we talk about at the beginning is budget. Establishing your budget, you can get crazy and crazy and crazy and have all these millions and millions of things. And so I think it's really important to, communicate and honestly, if I'm giving my very candid advice, pick that number from the very beginning.
Absolutely.
Know exactly how much money you are willing to work with, and then go from there. And if it starts to get over that number, you got to cut it out. And I think that is another way that we continue to reorient ourselves back to Christ, because we are not focusing on me. This is what I want. This is how I want everybody to perceive me. This is not just about you. This is about you, your spouse, Christ, and the community around you that's supporting you. So I would say those are two really big ways in which I think we can bring people in. And then as well as being grateful and being thankful and expressing that thanks and that gratitude to everyone around you all throughout the day, and just practice that. We did a kind of a silly thing at our reception there. The women at the church did all the serving. My uncle catered it, but they did all the serving. And so I bought 2 Adirondack chairs that were like hot pink, and I put stickers on them, and I said, take a load off. And so, just little things like that you can do that might be kind of cute and silly, but just to let people know that we're thinking about you and we're so appreciative of you.
I love that. It's beautiful.
I think it's so beautiful what you're sharing, what both of you are sharing, because I think that's so different than what the culture that we're living in obviously tells us. The culture that we're living in is telling us that wedding day is, you're the princess, he's the prince, and it is your day, and this is all about you. Right. And I think our wedding service, as you both know very well, is not about us. It's about our marriage to Christ as a couple. And I oftentimes call it a second baptism. It's no longer the individual joining Christ. It's now the couple joining Christ. And I love what you're sharing, Delaney, because I think it's so easy to fall into that trap. I'd like to just explore a little bit more to what we were talking earlier. And before I do that, I do want to invite, once again, our listeners, if they'd like to call and speak with either Presbyterian Christi or with Delaney, please call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. Or feel free to leave us a comment on our Facebook or on Ancient Faith's YouTube page. We'd love to hear from you, especially if you're planning a wedding or have some questions. But I think, one of the things I would love to hear both of your comments is, I think that planning a wedding is probably the very first time, not always, but oftentimes in my experience as a priest, is the very first time where you can see tension created within a relationship, and where you kind of get to know your spouse to be rather quickly, and really the dynamics of family members who are around. How do you navigate? We talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'd love to kind of go a little bit deeper on this. How do you navigate major personalities in a relationship in which, let's just use, just for hypothetical examples, you have a spouse to be, he's much more reserved, and as you mentioned, to use the example that you were alluding to earlier, let my mom do it, if she wants to get involved, that's great. Well, if that mom is very powerful and wants to kind of influence the bride to be, how do you kind of navigate the bride and how to navigate those personalities? Because you don't want to offend, you realize that this is all family and you don't want to kind of hurt people, but at the same time, there is something extraordinary about your own wedding day. What would you suggest to a couple that's listening tonight that may be struggling with that? Delaney, if you want to start us out.
Yeah. First and foremost, all that keeps coming to mind is pray, 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 pray. Mm-hmm. You should just be praying throughout this entire process. And I have seen this happen in many weddings, and it's hard to watch, and it's sad. And then it's always so funny because at the end of that reception, it's like, poof, we're back to normal. It's the weirdest thing. It is just like that term bridezilla. Oh my goodness. It is a thing. And a lot of that does stem from a lot of family pressure. And so, I think the starting block for that is to just pray. And I think that the goal of this book is to really help you not get to that place. But you also have to be on board with the idea that this isn't about you. Mm-hmm. And that can sometimes be a tough pill to swallow. It's a hard question. It's a hard, it's a hard thing to answer because it's so easy to get swept up in it. But I think that if you, yourself, as a bride, you're really struggling with in-laws or some challenging personalities, just take a step back and try to be prayerful about it. And God will guide you and get you through this, and go talk to your parish priest, find those people, in your church community that can help be a guiding, spiritual force and give you some encouragement. That would maybe be another good way to kind of stay grounded and not lose your sanity.
Yes. I've seen it so often. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, Krista, and also Roxanne, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. Krista, if you could share your comments.
Yeah. Well, another piece of advice I received was from the presbytera, the matuszka at my church before getting married. And she said, this period of engagement is a time for you to strengthen your relationship with Christ, because you're about to let somebody else into that. Marriage being Trinitarian, right? You and your spouse and Christ. And one thing that I think this book does really well is reminds us, as we're sifting through all the details that, you know, are necessary to some degree when planning a wedding, is to return to Christ, right? So as Delaney said, pray first, right? We have those prompts to remind us, okay, what are we going to pray for during this process? What specifically are we going to bring to Christ in our prayers? What are we concerned about? If it be, you know, family relationships or tensions, or what conflicts are arising? What can we invite Christ into? Because that's where he wants to be with us. So that's I
love that advice that presbytera gave you, the matuszka that gave you that. That's what such wise advice, that you're going to be bringing someone else into your little church, into your relationship with Christ, and that's so wise. I love that.
I don't think that we always look at ourselves as in a journey like that we are a witness. You know, how we walk through our stress becomes, you know, a testimony to somebody else, and a display, you know, that either invites people to light or kind of squelches their opinion of it. And I really love that notion of thinking about it in that way. And I think sometimes, you know, I think what we often find is that people argue a lot over, you know, the kind of surface level content of, I'm going to do this, or I'm not going to do this, or my in-laws want me to do this. And, you know, we kind of get stuck up there on the surface. And I think, you know, one of the things I always ask people to consider is, you know, what is the meaning or depth behind why the request is there? You know, we learn so much about people from kind of asking a little bit deeper questions. And I do see the mother-in-law tension, you know, quite a bit in planning weddings. And so sometimes, you know, my recommendation is take a step back and learn about her. You know, what is it about this that is important? Why is it important? Where did it come from? And a lot of times once you discover the core of it, there's a lot of ways to satisfy the need of it, right? Without kind of going in the exact direction that she may have wanted to go. And so sometimes it just kind of becomes a learning process, a curiosity, you know, where we discover who people are at their soul, at their core, and a really neat growth opportunity, I think, for the couple to get to better know, you know, the future families that will be involved in their lives for the rest of their lives. And the planning process is certainly an opportunity that can, I think, create difficult grounds for doing that. Because although, you know, the day after everything kind of goes away, a lot of times I find people remember, you know, the tougher moments, the tougher fights, the arguments. And so I think it becomes an opportunity to really look at it as, you know, I could really begin anew here, you know, and start a foundation of learning about my in-laws and learning about my family, and kind of finding shared ground, common ground, and they learn you better too. Because that certainly can be a difficult time. That was actually one of the Facebook questions that had come in about, hey, how do I deal with a very strong mother-in-law trying to dictate the course of a wedding?
Well, let's take a quick break right now. We are up for a break, so let's take a quick break. On the other side of this break, we're going to ask Presbytera Krista and Delaney about what are some practical ways that we can keep Christ at the center throughout this entire process, because there's so many things that are going to be coming at us when we're planning a wedding, and so we wanted to kind of give you some practicality about how to do so. So stay right with us right here on Live with the Louhs.
Live with the Louhs with Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne will be back in a moment. Give them a call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. They would love to hear from you.
During his darkest moments on the cross, Jesus uttered 7 statements. His words offer us principles to live by, lessons of hope, peace, and comfort. I'm Dr. Roxanne Lowe.
And I'm Father Nicholas Lowe.
And our new book, 6 Hours, 7 Lessons, is all about how Christ's light transcends our darkness.
Christ's final words have the power to bring us into the light of his love and protection, providing wisdom and direction to follow when we face our own dark seasons. Get your copy today by going to store.ancientfaith.com. That's store.ancientfaith.com.
We're back with Live with the Louhs and Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne. Do you have a question for the Louhs? Call in now at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Here once again is Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to Live with the Louhs. We're so happy that you're joining us this evening on this Tuesday, May 28th. We are talking about marital planning, like how do you plan your wedding? And this is a unique guest because oftentimes we tend to talk about once the wedding has happened and how do we keep the marriage strong afterwards, and how do we keep a God-first marriage and keep the just the mission, the vision that Christ has for our marriage continuing. But this is really the first time that we've actually had guests on our show who have written a recent book called Crowned, an Orthodox Christian Wedding Guide. And it's all about preparing a couple, an engaged couple, through the entire process up to their wedding date. And so we're so excited to have both President Krista and Delaney with us. I'm so honored that you're both here with us. These are the spouses of two seminarians who are at St. Tikhon's Orthodox Theological Seminary, one of the Orthodox seminaries that we have here in our states. We would love to hear from you. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. And before we go any further, I do want to remind all of you that our daily messages are available. You can go to thelouhs.com. If you're not receiving them, you should. They're at thelouhs.com/subscribe. And every day at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, once you pull in your email address at 7 a.m. Eastern Time in your email inbox, you'll receive that day's daily inspirational message. And if you're already receiving them, by the way, feel free to share them with your friends and family. We just want to be a source of light and hope to people that are, as they're going through their own walk of faith. And also, I do want to let you know that next Tuesday, we have a very special Live with the Louhs. We have the chief religion correspondent for Fox News is going to be with us, who's actually an Orthodox Christian and a very devoted and devout Orthodox Christian, who's going to be talking to us about her brand new book called Light for Today. That is Lauren Green's. We're going to have her on next Tuesday, so we hope that you'll be with us on that show as well. So I guess before the break, we were talking about, one of the things I love about this book and what you're talking about is how important it is to have Christ not only at the wedding sacrament, but also at the wedding reception. But I think also too, and I was going to ask you this, Krista, and Delaney, love to hear your thoughts as well on this, but let's start out with Krista. I mean, I think for a lot of couples, even sometimes having Christ at the center of the wedding service is sometimes so difficult because you're in the moment, you're looking at him, she's looking at you, and it's kind of like you're in the I remember seeing Roxanne walk down the center aisle. I mean, that was so powerful for me. And I'll be quite honest with you, I don't remember a lot of the wedding day. I don't really remember a lot of the wedding night, to be honest with you, which is kind of like a blur. But but just in general, how would you recommend not only at the wedding reception, but even at the wedding day, the service itself, and even prior to that, what are some ways that couples can do to kind of really keep Christ at the center?
So I'll start with the reception. The idea of keeping Christ at the center was not my idea, was not Delaney's idea. I came across it in St. John Chrysostom. Mm-hmm. He has, there's the book on marriage and family life. My priest had me read that little green book. Mm-hmm, I think it's pretty popular. And he says, invite Christ. So when Christ is present at a wedding, he brings cheerfulness, pleasure, moderation, modesty, sobriety, and health. And St. John has a lot to say actually about planning a wedding in that little book. And we pull from him throughout the text of this book to really help keep us centered. So it could be, all right, so if Christ were at your wedding, what music would you be playing? What would you be wearing? How would you be interacting with your guests? And we go through and give specific ideas of how that perspective and how that mindset helps you to craft some of those decisions about what kind of experience you're crafting for your guests, and how might that day play out. And then to answer your part about keeping Christ at the center of the ceremony, yet again, another piece of advice that I received was to pray for it. So everyone says the wedding day, just like you said, Father, goes by in the blink of an eye. But maybe it doesn't have to be that. Maybe we don't have to just succumb to that. Oh, yep, this is just the day I've been planning for months. It's just going to be over like that. But to ask God through your process to help him, for him to help you stay present. And one thing that really helped me and my husband was we found the text for the Orthodox marriage service and read through that leading up to the service, understanding that, there's going to be a lot going on and a lot of people. And, maybe I'm going to be thinking like, oh man, like I really wish I wasn't wearing these heels during the gospel reading, right? When you want to be engaged. But reading through those really beautiful prayers, the epistle and the gospel reading, having an understanding of what the flow of the ceremony is like. So, when you'll be asked to take a sip of wine or start walking or holding a candle or getting crowns on your head, just being familiar and having that service, kind of that truth embedded in you already, helped us, I believe, stay a little bit more present during
I love that. The idea of reading through the service ahead of time. I mean, our Orthodox wedding service is just so beautiful, from just a wealth of spiritual, significance. I mean, I think there's so, it's not, do you take, this person as your wife and okay, we're done, we give a kiss and we walk out. I mean, there's just so many beautiful aspects of knowing even what they mean. Why do we have the crowns? Why do we walk around the table? Why does the priest hold our hands and lead us around the table? Knowing, I think, what great encouragement for couples to read through that and to understand every intricate part of that service, because there is such meaning and a calling on the marriage from the beginning for what the expectation is, for what Christ intended it to be. And that the whole service is really, it's not so much about your individual, your dress. And it's so funny. I actually remember choosing my dress. I think I went to all of these places, after I saw these catalogs and everyone showing me these catalogs, and I had gone to my very first place in my little hometown of Gainesville. It must have been a hole in the wall dress store. And it was the cheapest dress. It was the first one I tried on. And then after seeing all these catalogs, I went all over creation looking for this dress, only to come back and get the very first dress that I tried on that was dirt cheap and from the tiny little store. Right.
And you kind of, I think what we were talking about earlier, it becomes this contagious thing that you start looking
you start like, wow, I couldn't go for this. Right.
Yeah. And you're looking at all these different, and it is, I love the idea of this book, because I think for many ways it kind of, in a very respectful way, it kind of jerks our leashes a little bit and says, hey, wait a minute, guys, let's get the right perspective on what's really going on here. And let's not get caught up in what the world's kind of telling us this day needs to look like, and really what God wants it to look like for us, because it's God who brought us together, as the prayer says in the wedding service. Delaney, I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. I mean, I know that, when you're talking about these big three that we should do, what would you recommend? I mean, for some people that may be difficult to kind of just even have a filtering process to try to figure out what are those three things. Can you kind of guide us as to what would be, how do you navigate through the book, guiding a couple into defining what those three things are?
So right at the onset, we propose some ideas of like what that could be, what those things could be, and then we take you through each element of, it's meant to be also very practical. So we try to address every component, that could, not probably every exhaustive component, but most of the big components of planning a wedding. And so throughout that, there's constant call outs to scripture. And there's wedding planner tips, ideas, things, very practical things like, there's a section where we talk about, your bridal party. And we say, think about how, in some ways, like, we get really caught up in like, our bridal party has to have a certain vision. And so we offer the suggestion of, let them choose their dress, maybe give them some parameters like length or color, but, give them the freedom to feel beautiful in whatever they want to choose. And so there's little planning tips embedded throughout the entire process that goes through kind of each category of the planning stage. And then even within that, there's constant reference back to, is this aligning with your original big three? And if it's not, then maybe you need to kind of rethink about what you're doing. And another thing I wanted to mention too, that we talk about at one point in the book, and I think this sort of leads into a little bit about what you're discussing with, how do you invite Christ into that ceremony as well as the reception? But we talk about not only when to plan, but when not to plan. And I think that that's a great preparatory way to spiritually prepare yourself for the sacrament of marriage and what's most meaningful. And so, we offer this suggestion, don't plan on Sundays. Make that day what it's meant to be. Make that the Lord's Day, and take a total mental and physical break from all of those activities. And in that way, you are focusing on Christ and the church and, the scriptural component, like Krista said, reading those prayers ahead of time. And then even if you and your spouse can sneak away, before the ceremony, maybe the day before your wedding, and go into the church, just the two of you, and, go stand before the icon of Christ and pray to him together. I think that those are some practical things that you can do. And so I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. I just want to kind of follow up with this, I don't know how many weddings I've been to, obviously in Serbia, countless, but one of the things that kind of sometimes can be a little frustrating for me, I'm sure other priests have felt the same exact way, is where you have a beautiful couple and, God love them, they have people in their bridal party that are sometimes family and obviously friends, but how do you navigate bridal parties that can kind of get a little bit out of hand? Sometimes, because you see sometimes at weddings, we were at a wedding several weeks back, and, immediately when people come there, it's like the first thing they're thinking about is the consumption of alcohol, and it becomes so much.
Don't have an open bar.
Yeah, right. Is that one of the suggestions that you have there in the book then, is like?
It's not a suggestion in there, but that was something that was talked about a lot in my wedding, leading up to the wedding, planning for my own wedding. My parents, they were like, you have this amount of money for alcohol and that's it. And so, I know that that's not everyone's philosophy, and that can be, you want to put on a nice event and you want people to enjoy themselves, and that's totally fair, and you should do that. But I also think having some limitations on what you serve can help to keep people from getting to that place. And as well as like what Chris said, music also plays a really big role in how your party behaves on the dance floor. So think about some of those things. And so sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's a big one.
Yeah, Krista, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well, please.
Yeah, so as part of the first part of the book, when we're inviting the couple to establish the big three and think about the vision, we talk about the people, right? Who is involved in this process? Who's going to be surrounding you on your big day? So of course, the priests and the celebrants, your marriage sponsors who's going to walk with you during the wedding day and throughout the marriage, and then the bridal party. There's not really a role, of course, as you know, in the Orthodox service for a bridal party. Sometimes the maid of honor and best man get conflated with the marriage sponsors of the kumbari. But the marriage sponsor is really a unique role in that sacrament. But thinking about your bridal party as, okay, these are people who are walking with us, not just on the wedding day, but through the marriage, right? Who's going to be witnessing in a very important way up there at the front, this really beautiful sacrament. So at the onset, when thinking about, okay, who's going to surround us on this big day, that goes not just to the liturgical components and the roles of what's happening in the actual service, but everyone involved, to even, who your photographer's with you all day. What kind of personality and energy do you want coming from that person who's shadowing you all day? So in the same way, thinking about and choosing your bridal party,
and
what kind of tone do you want?
Right. Do we address how to select that sponsor? Because I think sometimes just by default, we kind of use a family member who may or may not reflect what the role should look like. I mean, I think we just kind of do it sometimes by habit, or a friend that we just feel obliged to have in that role. Do we talk about that in the book as well?
Yeah. So advising you to really understand what the role of the marriage sponsors are, and selecting people who you really think will be able to fulfill that role. Importantly, this book is not replacing the guidance of a parish priest or spiritual father or father confessor. So we do stay within our scope, and we have many, many reminders to say, this is something to talk about with your spiritual father or your parish priest, how to come to this decision together as a couple, because it's important.
Yeah, I love looking at the wedding as also, in part your responsibility for what you're leading others toward. I don't think very many people would even think to consider the music and what that may provoke on your dance floor. They hire the DJ because he came, really well recommended. And that's kind of so I love that you're really asking people to think about sort of every unique aspect of what we are actually creating, because the wedding, I do also believe, creates a culture, and an environment where people are either reminded of Christ or not, or quite the opposite. But I mean, how far do you think we've gotten as a culture away from what Christ intended marriage and wedding day to look like?
Oh gosh, miles far. We are so far away. I laugh, but it's sad, really. It's all about consumption. It's so self-centered. And I mean, I think we see that in our secular world just in general. We see so much of that. And that has bled into, unfortunately, into, those of us who are getting married, even in, because we are also part of our culture. It's hard to say no to the outside world. We can't live in a bubble, and nor do I believe we should. But I think, we've come so far away from what Christ intended, and so I think that's one of the beautiful things that we tried to do, was to be empathetic and understanding to the demands of our world and what all the temptations that are being thrust upon us as we're preparing to get married, and all of the ways that the secular world is trying to grab our attention. We were trying to be very understanding of that. And we don't want you to have to forego, all of the traditions that you're used to. One thing, too, that we talk about in this book, or at the very, very beginning, sort of in the intro, is the fact that, you may or may not both be, Orthodox Christian. You might have a spouse who, is not Orthodox and maybe is becoming Orthodox, or, at some point will be Orthodox. But, that I've seen that before, where the bride was not Orthodox and the groom was. And so the bride just feels so overwhelmed that she has to abandon all of the traditions that she thought she was going to get to have at her wedding. Because, some priests, they don't want you to walk down the aisle. They want to do the whole marriage ceremony in the back, so you can't walk down with your dad. And that was something that I did at my wedding, but I was very prepared. I was raised in the faith, and I was prepared for that custom, and I was very on board with that. So I think we're trying to be, like I said, we're trying to be empathetic and understanding of all the demands and all the ways, all the temptations of the world, and provide you ways to incorporate the things that you want, but in a Christ-like way, and in the way of the Orthodox faith and in the church. So we're trying to bring that balance into this whole process.
It sounds so intentional. That's what I get from this book, that if you read it, it allows you to sort of walk through the planning stage with a super intentional and spiritually rich mind, so that what you produce on the other side is like a beautiful mirror to your soul, as opposed to sort of a self-absorbed process.
We only have about 3 minutes left in the show, and I always do this especially with just topics that I think are so pertinent to what we're going through right now. If you've, for both you, Krista and Delaney, I know that the time is short, but I'd love to just hear your final thoughts, just nuggets of wisdom. You've got a bride to be or a groom to be that are maybe listening tonight to the show or downloading this podcast. What would be, they're in the middle of the planning process, so what would be some advice that, Krista, you would give? And then we'll start with you, and then Delaney, if you can close us out, I'd appreciate that.
Oh, I think big picture piece of advice is, as silly or as small as something may seem, invite Christ into this process with you. He wants to be there with us. So it's easy to feel alone at times, but you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful.
I love that. And Delaney?
I would say practice gratitude in every step of the way. And I think by practicing that gratitude, you are going to find yourself being drawn toward Christ, and you're inviting him in through that practice. And I just think being thankful to everyone around you and making a conscious and intentional decision to say thank you and to be appreciative will serve you well. Maybe you won't even notice it in the moment, but you will notice it in the months and the years to come.
Delaney, let me ask you, just while we're on this topic, I mean, many of our listeners, unlike a lot of the other shows here at Ancient Faith, we tend to get a great deal of people who are not necessarily Orthodox, that are just, they may be inquiring, but more importantly, they're just trying to understand faith and psychology a lot more.
Sure.
In your perspective, I mean, if there's a non-Orthodox couple, could they benefit from this book, and why?
Yes, I think so, because I think if you're using this book, you are getting married in the Orthodox Church. And so I think that this will help you to understand what it might look like, what it looks like to be married in the Orthodox Church and what that means. And it might help you to understand, some of the considerations that your spouse and their family, are thinking about that you might not really understand because you're not in the faith. And so the idea is that, you're going to be getting married in the Orthodox Church, so at least one of you is Orthodox Christian. And so I think that this can help, if you are a non-Orthodox Christian, this can help you understand some of the elements of the Orthodox wedding and the ceremony and the sacrament and why we do some of the things we can do. And it can, it can help you to be more understanding and hopefully more appreciative.
I love that. I also would argue, I think that even for people that are if the couple themselves, neither one of them are getting married in the church, I do think there's a beauty about the Orthodox Christian wedding service that transcends, just what our local church is about. I mean, it is what we would argue, everyone, is that we would argue that the Orthodox Church has these 2,000 years of uninterrupted history of wisdom from the church fathers and the saints, as mentioned by, I think, Krista, you had mentioned earlier about St. John Chrysostom, who is recognized amongst many of the mainline Christian churches. And his book on marriage and family is a classic. So I definitely think that because this book utilizes a lot of the traditions of the church in general, I think that if you're looking for the deep end of a practical guide to planning a wedding, I would say that whether or not you're getting married in the Orthodox Church or not, I think it'd probably be very beneficial for you to have this book. So you can find this book right here at Ancient Faith Publishing. Just go to store.ancientfaith.com. And when is the book actually being released?
This coming June, so very soon.
Okay, so be on the lookout for it in June, everyone. Again, it's called Crowned, an Orthodox Christian Wedding Guide. President Krista and Delaney, wow, what a pleasure to meet you both. I look forward to, I'm sure, we look forward to seeing you at events and just being part of the church world together. Congratulations to both of you for a great job on this book. And as you guys continue to grow, feel free to come back on our show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, everyone, just to remind you to join us next Tuesday. We have a special guest in Lauren Green, who is the chief religion correspondent for Fox News. She's going to be talking to us not only about her Orthodox Christian journey into our church, but also about her great book. It's a daily devotional called Light for Today. It's outstanding, and we encourage you all to be there. That's next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday right here on Ancient Faith Radio. I want to thank to our producer, Elijah, for doing an amazing job producing tonight's show, and all of you, thanks so much for being with us. God bless you all, and stay strong in your walk of faith.
Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne are the authors of the book Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan, which can be purchased at store.ancientfaith.com. Their daily inspirational messages can be found at thelouhs.com/subscribe. Be sure also to search for The Louhs on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Live with the Louhs is a listener-supported presentation of Ancient Faith Radio.